Hello and welcome to today's exciting event, AI and Change Management, what it means for change managers. And this is sequel 2. I am Shanice Mitchell-Cox at APMG International, and I am joined by the wonderful Melanie Franklin. Melanie Franklin is the founder of Change Capability Community and is a change management specialist. Welcome to today's event, Melanie.
Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to following up from the great event that we had in September. But don't worry, if you didn't see the one in September, I'm not assuming any particular knowledge when it comes to artificial intelligence.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to get into this event. So before I hand over to Melanie, I wanted to thank you all for joining. And I also wanted to let you know that this event is being recorded. In addition, we are about to launch our first poll of the event today. So if you could head over, you're going to get a pop-up on your screen. Please feel free to put in your vote so you can get as much information from our audience today. So the poll is going to appear on your screen in a few seconds, and we will be able to see the votes moving around very soon. So get your votes in now. What skill do you think is the most important skill in an AI-driven workplace? I really like seeing these polls on the screen because you get to see all the answers moving around.
And it's that interaction, and it's always helpful to understand.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Wonderful. So we're going to keep collecting those votes. In addition, I did want to say that if you would like to submit a question for Melanie to answer, we will ask you to put it in the Q&A box in the taskbar below. Okay, so head over to the Q&A box in your taskbar if you would like to submit a question for Melanie. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand straight over to Mel so that she can go through the presentation with you. So over to you, Mel.
Well, that's brilliant. Thank you. Just before I get started, it's sort of just talking about the emphasis that I'm coming at here, which is that I'm sure a lot of us are using various AI tools. And the whole point that I wanted to get to on this was that it's almost a practical application of it. So I'm just going to share my slides, and hopefully you'll all be able to see these and it'll all work out well for you. So hang on a second. As usual, let's get these in place. So let's have a look here. So I want to talk about the impact on our roles, because I do think that anyone working in change, it's going to affect what we're responsible for. I think, therefore, that leads us to thinking about skills, and I want to talk about next steps. So let's have a look at how this comes together. The first thing that I always go back to new research, particularly with change management and AI. There is a lot of research going on. Sounds like somebody's got some dog barking somewhere, so hopefully they're enjoying this too. I'm sympathetic because I've got 4 of my own. And some of the latest research, and some of this came out from only this month. I thought this, particularly the HBR article, was particularly helpful about how executives are seeing artificial intelligence, in that AI technology may be moving at lightning speed, but people are not. And that disconnect is one of the main issues that are facing us, I think. And that they pointed to human issues such as culture and change management as the key challenge to data and AI adoption. And I think what we're going to see here is that we are also going through a change ourselves, and our roles are changing. And so I hope that what you get out of this webinar is some ideas about how, if you work through some of the things I'm going to take you through, you are affected by this. If you work through these things, then it gives you almost a model or a plan for how you can also take other people through the human impact of how artificial intelligence is starting to change our jobs. I think that the OECD report here in the middle about the levels of human sort of curiosity that we need almost is now the new basis for how we do things. We've got to be able to ask the right questions. We need to know when to rely on AI and when not to, when original thought is absolutely important. And that means that we are going to have to take quite active decisions, almost as the AI can be working almost alongside us as a partner for us. And I hope I'm going to describe also how I'm seeing that I'm working with AI in partnership on some of the things that I do. But I have to decide when I turn to my partner and when I do the work for myself. So there is a fluency here. And I thought this was very interesting because the article went on to talk about how important it is to describe your fluency in things like your LinkedIn profile and your CV these days if you're applying for jobs, because that is becoming absolutely crucial. And there's a recognition that perhaps organizations that are most successful at squeezing the most value out of AI are those that are actually planning the change to make it happen. So I just wanted you to think that a lot of this comes from not just what I'm saying, but I'm trying to knit together for you the absolute latest research in a subject that is moving very, very fast. But I'm going to look from a practical viewpoint today. And I picked up this slide really from this is a sequel to the one we did in September that was incredibly popular, but we left it on a note which said, one of the things we ought to recognise is that there are human tasks and AI tasks, and that the humans, we are better at relationship building. We are better at creativity and deciding which direction to go in through our imagination and our curiosity. We have emotional intelligence, and we can apply morality and ethics. We mustn't forget that AI has many qualities, but what we're looking at here is there's generative AI, which can generate information off the back of us prompting it. There's agentic AI, where we can create an agent who can work alongside us, who can take decisions based within certain parameters. But again, it's us as human beings who are setting what those parameters are. So they can do repetitive tasks and it make decisions using the data that we give it, but it's all about that predefined logic. And it can analyze vast amounts of information at a far greater speed than we can. But that doesn't mean to say that it fully understands perhaps some of the emotional or political undercurrents of the information that it's reading. So we've got to come at this from the position that, actually there's a difference between human and machines, and that's what we need to be thinking about. So I took an extension of that. So here's all the practical application of what that means. So in the top right here, very little diagram from the previous, it was the ending of the last webinar, where we talked about suggesting that perhaps you want to think about your role description and how, or any role description, if I'm setting up a new team, for example, I might now start to write role descriptions that look at both things that I want humans to do and things that I want AI to do. So this got me thinking, okay, well, let me grab a role description, and this is for a role that's being advertised in the United Kingdom right now. It's for a business change manager, and I want to look at, using the different colours here, what I think we might be seeing shifting towards AI. Some of the things that are in this role description would be better done by AI, and how therefore that leaves me with a lot more time to do some of the human things. This job description absolutely hasn't been written on the idea of human tasks versus AI tasks, but we can start to have a practice at how we might do this. So let's have a look. Define the portfolio of all the different transformation programs. Well, AI is going to be very good. If I fill it with a source of information of all the different things that are going on, meeting minutes or transcripts and minutes of all of the strategic documentation about the projects, it will help me define a list of all of the initiatives that are happening. It can process information at such a speed that it can certainly give me the start and end dates, and it can actually develop me a fully integrated portfolio. But the management of that portfolio and negotiating with all the competing parties, what goes first, what comes next, where are the overlaps and duplications, and how are we going to resolve some of those? That management, that's a human element, isn't it? And it's about navigating the culture of the organization. It's navigating the political sort of power plays within stakeholders, dealing with people who are in a bad mood, dealing with people who are enthusiastic. All of that is the human element. But conduct the in-depth analysis of organizational efficiencies. Well, I think I can hand that straight off to AI. Thank you very much. Get that done. Develop data-driven recommendations. Well, yes, I think it can do that, but the recommendations to improve performance, recommending things and getting the political support to take those recommendations forward, bearing in mind that, you know, I was advising a board last week with recommendations, and I was very aware that for certain things, some of the people around the table would have seen it as a criticism of what they've achieved to date, with other people who were going, yes, we absolutely need to do that. And understanding that power play in the room and the language I therefore chose about how I explained my recommendations to honour the contribution that those directors had made so far, not to rubbish what their departments were doing, and to create a feeling that we were building on their past successes and just extending and going further, not fixing problems. Well, that was all of my choice. That was my humanity, my empathy coming out. So having the analysis done for me very, very quickly by AI is fantastic. But then it gives me a lot more time to really think through what I want to say, rehearse what I want to say. Developing any kind of governance and rules and structures, fantastic. I was using AI only yesterday. I asked it for global best practice for some cybersecurity rules, and it gave me a fantastic set of information without me having to read lots and lots of different sources. By the way, I never fully accept the answers that I get from AI straight away. Of course I don't. So I will put it through some other checks. I might use ChatGPT or Copilot, but I might put something through Claude or Gemini and see what it comes up with, just to cross-check. But certainly it was able to give me all of that. But how we then apply that, again, there's a lot of negotiation in there. There's a lot of persuasion and influencing and motivating to get something applied. That is going to be down to humanity. Tracking the progress, adapting plans, that's all AI, but on the end there, it says evolving business needs, and really having that sense of, well, what is the organization trying to achieve? I know that I could read, you know, the strategic objectives, but it's actually the conversations you have with the different managers and sort of getting that sense of where the energy is pointing in the organization is part of those evolving business needs. So I think there's something about being a human there. Identifying, assessing and mitigating risks, all of that work, ensuring momentum and stakeholder alignment though, again, humans. It's human to human. As soon as there's that's a part of my work. But you can start to see how I'm splitting this. Driving continuous improvement, driving anything requires encouragement and motivation and persuasion. So I think that's where I, as a human being, will be successful. I'm amazed how much I can get AI to do for my my communication planning now. Structuring the communications, I can give it a certain perspective. I can tell it quite a lot about the power and the influence and the interests of my stakeholders, and tell it to take that perspective, and it will do. So I'm finding that, you know, it's really cutting down a lot of my work, but then actually ensuring that all of that work is actually getting us where we want to be, and that the whole program's pointing in the right direction, and thinking about the wider sort of improvements that we're trying to get to. That still sits with me. That's something that I need to do as somebody who understands the bigger context and the cultural context and the political context of the organisation. So I hope you found that useful. I don't know if anything's coming up, Shanice, in the chat, but you know, this is an exercise that I've done it for myself. And I've been quite harsh on the things that I've said, no, hand that out to AI. This is what you need to retain. And I've just worked through one for you guys. But this is maybe something that we're going to start to do more of as we start to restructure. Anything I should know in the chat there, Shanice, or we're all okay? Yeah. Okay, that's absolutely fine, no worries. Again, I'm using myself as an example because it's got to be real. I think you want to hear real experience. So I looked here and I was plotting my role. If you just look on the left-hand side for a moment, my role 6 months ago, and things like some of the things I've been doing about hosting polls, reading multiple reports. But over here on the right-hand side, I'm using AI now to assimilate multiple poll data, multiple reports, creating transcripts, that kind of thing. I can bring new services to bear. What I'm doing, and I'm looking at this one and going, well, I've actually got a later one of this as well. I'm constantly evolving my role and thinking more and more, what is AI able to give me? And so I think you'll find that this is something that you might want to think about. How much of your time is being spent on certain tasks? If they are now shifting to AI, what can you use that time for? Can you put in new services? Can you do new things that you couldn't do before? It looks like we've lost all the animation on here. I'm going to work through this one after the other, so bear with me. But what I wanted to do is just put right in the middle here. I wanted to put up just a simple stream of work that any of us in change might get involved in. And then I want to talk about how we can use AI, and then there's another one coming up here where we can use human skills. And I think, again, this is just thinking about how AI affects now, not just the role, but now I'm moving into another part of this presentation, which is all about the skills that we use. And I think this is something that we can really start to think about where we need to spend our time developing those skills. So in the middle here, something simple. I'm going to do some kind of process design workshop. I'm involved in a change. That's one of the things we do, isn't it? We've got to help people to develop their new ways of working. So on the left there, I'm going to do an email invitation to the process design workshop. I'm going to facilitate that workshop, get commitment to the outcomes from the workshop, motivate users to get on board with new ways of working, and persuade maybe the project team to change their deliverables connected to the new ways of working. I mean, this is fairly standard stuff. But let's look that there's quite a lot I can use AI for. In the email invitation to the workshop, I can get AI to create the structure and suggested wording for the invitation. That could be part of a bigger communications plan piece of work that I can prompt it to generate for me. I can get it to measure and track. Well, I sent it out to 50 people, 20 people have read it, 8 have replied, and I can ask AI to report on those stats for me every single day for a week, so I can see how I'm doing. When it comes to the workshop itself, I've been facilitating workshops for several decades, but I can now turn to AI, explain what it is I'm trying to get to, and ask it to generate all of the activities for me. I can get it to give me a flow, a timetable, even during the workshop. And I find myself doing this more and more, is that, when people have done an activity during the workshop and, they're reporting back to you and saying, and sharing their observations, I will ask them, if I'm face to face, if they mind if I record it on my phone so I can get a transcript very quickly, or I can ask them to record it on a virtual meeting and get the transcript, which immediately can pull together, all of the learning points and the next steps. So I can get AI to do an awful lot of the heavy lifting. I'm in my office now and I'm looking right over there at a whole load of flip charts where I did not do that on Friday when I did a workshop for various reasons. And And actually, one of the things I've got to do tomorrow morning is my first opportunity to sit down, and it's probably going to take me about an hour and a half to actually type up those flip charts. And I've been thinking how much time that actually takes and how rare that is that I do that anymore. Because when I'm facilitating a workshop these days, as people are talking through their flip charts, I have got the recorder going and I don't have to worry too much. The transcript will create the points for me. The only thing about tomorrow morning is I'm trying to convince myself that by doing the typing myself, more of it will go in here, because I am looking for the benefit, because I'm feeling like 90 minutes of something that AI could have done for me. It's depressing. But that just gives you a flavour for how much my role has changed. And I resent that hour and a half now hugely, because actually most of the time I don't use it. When it comes to getting the commitment to any workshop outcomes, I can use AI to, I can even use AI not just to identify the key stakeholders that I need to think about, but actually start to frame some of the arguments and write the persuasive communications for getting that done. And this is what I'm saying about working alongside AI. I mean, I might sit there and go back and forth quite often, getting it to refine what it's putting in front of me. And I might have an argument with it. I'll ask it to come up with other points, or I might go back and say, no, you need to shorten that to 3 sentences. But I'm working alongside a colleague. I'm not sure that I am as friendly as I would be to another human being. I'm much more dictatorial. I give it instructions and I tell it to get on with it. And so all of the time that we take to build relationships and be nice to each other goes right out the window. But certainly if I want to get commitment to workshop outcomes, AI can do quite a lot about writing up the arguments for why we should proceed with the outcomes, which is always helpful. When it comes to motivating users to practice new ways of working, for example, I could get it to timetable the changes and when those are going to be made, and all of the work involved in that. It can create me a lovely plan. And then when it comes to things like persuading the project team to maybe change their deliverables, I can help use AI to quickly sort of come up with a shopping list of what the requirements are, use the transcript for the workshop to come up with the arguments for why we need to make these changes, and give that definition of what maybe the test criteria are for those changes. So in these 5 steps sitting in the middle there's quite a lot that I can use AI for. But I thought it's helpful to also reflect on what, as a human being, is needed from me. So at the very beginning, before I send out the email invitation, it's me that will think about the context. Where does this workshop fit in terms of everything else we're doing on the change? Not in an analytical way, but actually in a contribution. Where is this taking us? How far along the journey is this taking us? Where does this fit in with other initiatives that are happening? I know that a colleague of mine is running a workshop next week. This will be useful input for that. And really thinking through, therefore, the outcomes of the workshop. What is it that would be non-negotiable? We need to walk away with these things agreed. These things would be nice to have. Really understanding my situation, and also driven by the culture of the organisation I'm working for and the wider strategic objectives and where this change fits into those. I'm not saying that AI can't necessarily appreciate all of those things and do that analysis, but I think it's that tying together of many different threads is what we are doing as humans. During the facilitation, AI cannot help me with really understanding who the key players are. It doesn't understand the political undercurrents. It doesn't tell me, who I would be using for certain things. And it certainly won't be able to work out who they like or dislike and how I need to mix up the groups to make sure that people who don't like each other aren't working together. And it's not going to build the trust. From a neuroscientific perspective, understanding the importance of oxytocin, that chemical that's produced when we see that we have something in common with people, where we feel like we're on board with each other, and that therefore I trust you, you trust me, and therefore I'm prepared to speak up and share my ideas, or I trust you, so I'm prepared to listen to your ideas. Those are all the essential agreements for co-design and collaboration. It's all driven by trust. Artificial intelligence isn't going to be able to do that because it doesn't understand the human condition. When it comes to getting commitment for workshop outcomes, it can't understand the political impacts. It doesn't understand that I am going to speak to a very grumpy chief operating officer, or that I'm actually speaking to the CTO who is actually very risk averse and needs to be encouraged gently through things to get them on board. So getting the trust, the support, and really understanding who the most influential of those stakeholders are is not something that AI can help me with. And it all comes down to that fundamental piece, doesn't it, about my willingness to invest in relationship building. I was speaking to somebody last week. I've got time back-to-back in offices next week, and it's about that willingness to be the one who's quite happy to help make the coffees in the middle of a meeting, for example. Spending a bit of time in the coffee area having informal chats. None of that can be replaced by AI. When it comes to motivating anybody to do anything and motivating users to start practicing new ways of working, you know, as a human being, having a conversation, a reassuring conversation, a listening conversation that gets across some of the benefits, allows people to vent their anger, and then know when to step in and say, this might solve some of the problems that are making you angry, but also knowing when to shut up and knowing that you'd be pushing them too far. If you kept on about the benefits, they start to hate you. So again, there's something about creating trust also to take risks, because trying out new ways of working is really quite terrifying. Demonstrating the empathy for the additional work that they're going through, and being there as a support, as a reassurance. You know, those are all the key things. The same with the project team, you know, acknowledging the impact on them, being empathetic, being willing to sort of explain, taking the perspective of the business to explain what the project team are actually being asked to do. So my point, I hope you're seeing, is that AI works alongside us, but that can't replace our human skills. But I think one of the things that we have to be prepared to do, one of the changes we're moving towards, is that we can't do this thoughtlessly. We have to be ready to step in and put the effort into thinking this through. And actually, as I said, every few months I review my role and I start to sort of list out all the latest things I've sort of shifted towards AI and more of what I am doing. So if those are all those human things over there that I'm dealing with, the skills that I need, well, here's the World Economic Forum's skills for 2030 and the ones that they think are going to be in greatest demand by the end of this decade. Well, I was only speaking to somebody this morning about that sort of social management, leadership and sort of social management and social influence, and also curiosity, motivation, and still having the energy and the interest in something. These are, along with an awful lot of thinking skills, analytical systems and creative thinking. They're absolutely vital. This is the skills of the information age, sometimes known as Sophia, which have pointed out people and skills, change and transformation, and relationships and engagement as some of the absolute key skills for the information age. So for anyone involved in digital transformation or AI transformation, it comes back to those things that I said on the research reports. The winning organizations are the ones that recognize that it is human adoption of the available technology that is the key to getting the benefits from that investment. So I certainly feel that my overall take on this, my experience of this, is that I need to be ready to upskill, and I need to think about and carefully consider what my job is, what my value is, where do I need to be spending my time, but also where do I want to spend my time. I just don't think I can do what I've always done in the way I've always done it and still feel that I'm as relevant as I might be. So this got me thinking about techniques that I use, and I actually sat over the weekend and did this corporate profile technique. I've got lots of materials. If you want to get hold of me, I will share the links to some of these techniques for you. But I actually sat down and did the corporate profile, which is made up of sort of 4 sections. You know, where am I now? Which I found frustrating because I wanted to get onto the other sections, which are understanding the impact of AI, particularly on my role, where I want to go next, and sort of bridging that gap, you know, what skills analysis. And it was absolutely fascinating because there were some questions on there that made me stop and think about what are my values? What do I want to achieve in the next year or two? How do I want to use my time? Not just work-life balance, but at work, what do I think I could best use my time for? What else can I be asking AI to do? And it was just like replaying my career and thinking, where do I go next? It's absolutely mind-blowing, because I'm not sure that we do enough of this. The underlying theme I want to communicate today is that what has shifted, I think, with AI tools is that my role, just like yours, is I do more thinking, more contextualizing and understand the wider context and the culture. I do more, therefore, analysis, and I need to be more innovative and add more value. And if I'm brutally honest, therefore, one of the things that I've noticed is that it's more exhausting. I'm doing what we might call higher value work. A lot of the repetitive tasks, the simple tasks that you could just sort of get on and do are going. AI is taking all of that. And therefore, actually, it's harder sometimes, I think. And some of the things we're being asked to do are more risky, and they require a lot more analytical skill and intelligence and emotional intelligence. And it's exhausting. So that's certainly one of the conclusions. And it really played out when I was looking at, well, what's the impact of the changes? Where does that fit with my values, my priorities, what I want to be doing? So if you haven't done a corporate profile for a while and you haven't thought, well, what's my career? I strongly recommend it. Equally, I started to dive into the weight model is something I use a lot for defining the detail, you know, looking at the tasks that I'm responsible for, the actual physical activities I need to get through, like what's in my diary, what's in my schedule, what information I need to be able to do that. And then starting to think about, back to the skills, what abilities, what skills, what techniques do I need to be able to carry that out? And also, what's the attitude I'm sort of bringing to that work? And doing that kind of there's a realization, I think, that a lot more of this is about critical thinking. It's about decision making. So I need an awful lot of tools on decision making. And it's ultimately that is, you know, criteria driven decision making. Maybe I'll polish up my decision making a bit. Do I take timely decisions? It's made me ask all sorts of different questions about my skill set. But as I said, I can't get away from the fact that I think it's shifting it up a bit. You know, the simple typing up for 90 minutes tomorrow of all the answers on a flip chart is a rarity, because that kind of simplistic task is something AI could do. I've even asked myself whether or not I should photograph the flip charts and ask AI to type it up. And then I'll come back and review the notes. So I spend a lot more time reviewing, analysing, and trying to come up with new conclusions and having ideas than I ever had before. And I don't think I'm unusual. I think this is an overarching impact of AI on any role. I'm using myself and my change role as an example. And I think it really helps to work through some of these techniques, because if we don't do it to ourselves, A, we'll be out of step. But B, if we don't make those changes for ourselves, how on earth can we be the ones that lead others through those changes at work? And that brings me to an emotional aspect of this. I was coaching somebody last week through something very similar, in that a lot of the job description work that I did earlier on in this webinar about how many of the things that she's doing could actually be taken across to AI. And that's leaving her with a lot more of that assimilation and ideas generation and analysing and reviewing things all of the time. And there's an element in there of she's reviewing outputs and making connections between all of those things she's reviewing, but she's not perhaps creating so much for herself anymore. Anyway, in the coaching session, it really struck home for me how she was experiencing these changes as genuine loss and grief. And that the loss is triggered by the realization that some of the skills, like her ability, very similar to mine in a way, her ability to be able to design a fantastic workshop, with all great activities that engage people. Actually, you can ask AI for that, and within 30 seconds, it's giving you that whole list. And it was really apparent to me that she was grieving the feeling that some of the things that she'd taken years to learn and felt that she was quite good at was now being replicated by AI in about 30 seconds, and she felt devalued. She felt demotivated. She felt less of herself. And I'll be honest, this was a very emotional coaching session, because the more she talked, the more distressed she became. And it was an opportunity to allow her to grieve for the career she used to have and the role she used to have. Now, some of you might think, oh, that's totally an overreaction, because it's just work, isn't it? She's doing slightly different work. But there was an underlying sort of anxiety about how useful she still was. There was a real fear that she didn't have the thinking ability. She didn't have the intelligence for all of the sort of answers and new ideas she was supposed to come up with. And, the coaching is obviously that sort of psychologically safe space for her to have those feelings. But the sobbing that she was deeply distressed. And it really is, I'm sure this will stay with me for a very long time. I know that there are lots of models in change where we talk about this. And Professor William Bridges, I think of always as the guru when it comes to that kind of transition. And I think Daniel Goleman, who's the grandfather of sort of EQ, emotional intelligence, also has a lot to say on this. But it is that Bridges always talked to me about endings, that it's the start of any change is the ending of what was before. And I do wonder, how is that adoption of AI leading us to have that low-level grief? She was absolutely out there being honest about it and was obviously deeply affected, and it had come to a head. But it made me query and made me realise that perhaps I am also going through some of that as well. That I miss some of the boring tasks, the repetitive tasks, but they were simple and they were just low energy. And it was having those dotted around through my day or my week was a balance that I don't feel I have anymore. I'm being called to do the most, advanced things at all of the time. So let's not ignore the fact that perhaps there is a feeling of grief, that people are missing that aspect of their work. And that, in fact, I'm certainly at the forefront of adopting many AI tools, but recognising that this loss and grief is out there is something that's put me on alert for a lot of the changes that I'll be leading in 2026 and 2027, because I think that there's going to be more people who are going to come to that sort of conclusion. How I cope with this, I'm very lucky. I got to write the Neuroscience for Change at Work book. I obviously teach the course because of that. But I am so grateful, I'm lucky that I've had that chance to study how the brain reacts to change. And the whole point of this course is how we hack the brain from seeing changes, as that person I was coaching last week saw it as a threat, as an absolute threat to what they're doing. And actually how we can hack the brain and switch it. We can switch it over to seeing changes as reward. And the words that I use and the actions that I take, how I can shape how the brain interprets that change for good and not for loss. I constantly find that the things that are working for me come from the world of neuroscience. But I'm also aware that neuroscience points out how incredibly important an agile change approach actually is, because that incremental and iterative approach to change is exactly how the brain wants to treat things, doing a little bit, getting used to it, reflecting on it before doing the next bit. How that iterative incremental cycle actually plays exactly to how the brain likes to do things, which is in neuroscience, we talk about peaks and valleys, how we work at peak, but then we can reflect on and we can have insights and moments of intuition before we gear up again to do the next piece. So I'm grateful for all the things that I've been involved in the last few years, because it's brought me to this point where I think I have more coping tools than most when it comes to coping with this world of adoption of AI and how it's changing our roles. But that's my practical experience, and I can't wait to hear some of your questions and put me on the spot.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Melanie. So I think we're coming up for time pretty soon. So maybe if we get round to one question, if that's okay. So let me just have a little look. We've got a question from Claire Brazy. She says, thank you so much for a great session, Melanie. I heard a quote, humans for the extraordinary and machines for the ordinary, which I think is a reflection of what you've spoken about today. Do you think there would ever be a day when AI can replace us and our human skills, which is what I think most people are scared of?
I always go back to Professor Goldman, Daniel Goldman, on this. The lectures that I've been to with him, I think, bring up something which is around body language and particularly eye contact, and how that, from a neuroscientific perspective, generates certain chemicals in the brain. And we talk about things like mirror neurons, where we mirror each other's behaviour. And AI can never look me in the eye, and therefore AI can never stimulate those chemicals, and therefore I can never build mirror neurons with AI. So no, I believe that humans will always be unique. But that doesn't mean to say that we cannot exploit AI for the speed and the volume of information that it can create and assimilate.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And thank you for that great question, Claire. And thank you, Melanie, for such a great session. This has been amazing. And as you can see, we've got lots of people joining us from across the globe. So it's fantastic to see you all submitting your questions and giving us the answers. As you can see, there's a comment here that said, it is harder with AI emerging. I'm using some more deep thinking that AI can't do for me. So I think that's just a great way to summarize this event today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Melanie. We're going to move on now, and I'm going to present some of the upcoming shows that we do have. So coming up, we have our APMG Partner Spotlight with Green IT on the 6th of February at 2 o'clock GMT. And then on the 25th of February, we have Why Operational Resilience is Non-Negotiable for Business Survival. That's on the 25th of February, not one to be missed. And on the 25th of March, we have How to Create Project Delivery operating models that thrive in uncertainty. Thank you so much for joining today, and we look forward to seeing you next time.